Resident Evil protagonists aren't just characters you play as. They're a living timeline of how an entire franchise has evolved over 30 years. From fixed camera, puzzle box horror, to first-person psychological dread, to full-blown action blockbusters. Today, I'm breaking down every major protagonist and what their journey tells us about the series itself, starting with the man who's been here since day one, Chris Redfield. Chris Redfield is the longest-running protagonist in Resident Evil history, and honestly, his arc alone could be its own video. He's been in more games, more redesigns, and more memes than any other character in the franchise. But here's the thing, underneath all of that is a genuinely fascinating character evolution that most people completely overlook. Let me take you back to July 1998. Chris is a STARS Alpha Team marksman, highly competent, idealistic, militarily trained. He walks into the Spencer mansion alongside Jill Valentine, expecting a search and rescue mission. What he gets instead is a corporate bioweapons nightmare that changes his life forever. But at this point in the franchise, Chris is the baseline. He's the capable guy who will probably survive this. No deep internal conflict, no moral gray areas. Just a soldier doing his job. Then Code Veronica happens in December 1998, and everything starts to shift. Chris discovers his sister Claire has been captured on Rockford Island, and he goes after her. But the real turning point isn't the rescue, it's Wesker. His former captain is now a superhuman monster, and Chris can barely keep up. The developers made a deliberate choice here. They started bulking up Chris's character model to visually justify him competing with a guy who could punch through steel. Reasonable enough, right? But that design decision spiraled hard. By Resident Evil 5 and the BSAA era, Chris is operating in the Kijuju Autonomous Zone, looking like he bench presses helicopters for cardio. He'd participated in more BSAA missions than any of his peers at that point, and the cracks were forming. His tactics became increasingly aggressive. His partnership with Sheva Alomar was professional, sure, but it lacked the chemistry and history he had with Jill. You could feel something was off. The idealism was fading. And then Village happened in 2021, and the internet lost its mind. Slimmer build, completely different facial features. Fans immediately coined the hashtag #NotMyChrisRedfield, and the memes wrote themselves. But here's where it gets interesting. That redesign wasn't lazy or accidental. It was deliberate. Capcom wanted to present a more grounded, realistic man who had been worn down by decades of fighting. A man who was now willing to make ethically questionable calls for what he believed was the greater good. The guy who seemed to gun down Mia Winters in front of Ethan? That's not a glitch in his character. That's the destination. Chris Redfield's arc doesn't end with him saving the day and getting a medal. It ends with a man shaped by institutional corruption and personal trauma. Still fighting, but no longer certain he's entirely the good guy. He walked into the Spencer mansion as a hero. He walked out of Village as something far more complicated, but if Chris is the franchise's emotional anchor, then the woman who stood beside him from the very beginning deserves her own spotlight. Jill Valentine. Most people boot up Resident Evil 3 and see an action game. A woman with a gun fighting a monster through a city. But here's what nobody registers. Before the game even starts, before Jill fires a single bullet, she's sitting in her apartment on September 27th, 1998, contemplating ending her own life. That's the psychological baseline for everything that follows. Jill Valentine was recruited to STARS in 1996 as the only woman on Wesker's Alpha team, and she wasn't there to fill a quota. She was a bomb disposal expert and lockpicking specialist who earned her place through raw competency. The original Resident Evil gave her agency from the very first frame. She wasn't a damsel. She wasn't a sidekick. She was a fully operational field agent who survived the Spencer mansion on skill alone, but Raccoon City broke something in her. On September 28th, after choosing to fight instead of giving up, Jill spent days being hunted through collapsing streets by the Nemesis, a bioweapon designed specifically to kill STARS members. Not zombies stumbling around corners, a thinking, pursuing, adapting predator that followed her everywhere, and when it finally caught her at the clock tower and infected her, the damage went far deeper than physical. The T-virus scarred her body, the pursuit scarred her mind. Here's where it gets complicated. After Raccoon City, Jill didn't vanish. She spent months in isolation, suffering nightmares and PTSD-adjacent symptoms while investigating Umbrella's European European facilities alongside Barry Burton. She converted that trauma into purpose. By the early 2000s, she had co-founded the BSAA, building institutional infrastructure designed to prevent what happened to her from happening to anyone else. The scars remain, but they became a framework for action rather than paralysis. Then Wesker took even that from her. Resident Evil 5 revealed that Jill had been captured and subjected to P-30 mind control drugs, forced to fight against her own allies and her own morality. For years she had zero autonomy, zero choice. Everything she'd built after Raccoon City, every coping mechanism, every piece of rebuilt identity, was stripped away. 6 years of rehabilitation followed before she could function again. But functioning and healing are two very different things. By the RE6 era in 2013, Jill had developed a pattern of ignoring direct orders to assist survivors in the field, justifying it as preventing greater loss of life. Her superiors called it reckless, and honestly, it was. But it was also a woman trying desperately to atone for actions she couldn't control, making choices that felt like penance disguised as heroism. And this is what makes her trajectory so fascinating when you put it next to Chris. Same origin, same team, same mansion, completely different psychological destinations. Where Chris drifted toward moral compromise and questionable tactical decisions, Jill moved toward redemptive action at personal cost. The franchise never fully resolved which approach was right, maybe because there isn't a right answer when your entire worldview gets shattered before the age of 30. But if Jill's story is about trauma transforming into purpose, the next protagonist's story is about something entirely different, an ordinary person becoming extraordinary against their will. Leon S. Kennedy. Leon Kennedy showed up late to his first day of work and walked straight into the apocalypse. That's not an exaggeration. That's literally what happened. September 30th, 1998. 2 months after Chris and Jill barely survived the Spencer mansion, Leon pulls into Raccoon City for his very first shift at the RPD, and the entire city is already gone. Zombies everywhere. No colleagues to meet, no orientation, no here's where the coffee machine is. Just a dead city and a gun he barely knows how to use. And here's the thing, that was intentional. Capcom deliberately built Leon with weaknesses. Every protagonist before him had military training, special forces experience, or some kind of tactical background. Leon had none of that. He was a rookie cop who hadn't even clocked in yet. His survival carried more dramatic weight precisely because he wasn't supposed to make it. You're not watching a trained operative handle a crisis. You're watching a normal guy figure it out in real time, and that made him instantly the most relatable character in the entire franchise. But the franchise wasn't going to let him stay relatable for long. Fast forward to 2002. Leon has been recruited into US Stratcom and deployed on covert operations in South America, hunting drug lord Javier Hidalgo alongside former special ops partner Jack Krauser, rookie cop to federal operative in 4 years. That's not a career change. That's a complete identity overhaul. Then comes Resident Evil 4 in 2005, and this is Leon at his absolute peak. He's assigned to rescue Ashley Graham, the president's daughter, in rural Spain. No backup, no extraction team, just him. A village full of cultists controlled by Las Plagas parasites instead of zombies, and Ada Wong showing up with motives that nobody, including Leon, can fully pin down. He gets infected with the parasite himself. He has to undergo extraction alongside Ashley. He still pulls it off. The Ada dynamic is central to understanding Leon as a character. He clearly has feelings for her. She clearly operates on her own agenda, and neither of them ever fully resolves it across any game they appear in together. That unresolved tension gives Leon something most action protagonists lose after their second outing: emotional vulnerability. It's the one thing preventing him from becoming just another hardened operator with a perfect jawline. But by Resident Evil 6 in 2012, the hardening is almost complete. Leon is mature, experienced, and tasked with shooting the infected president of the United States. And he does it. That's what years of bioterrorism exposure does to a person. The guy who couldn't find the RPD front desk is now executing the leader of the free world without hesitation. Recent leaks for Resident Evil Requiem describe Leon as a stylish, good-looking, mature man, which tracks. But here's the kicker. Developers reportedly considered making him the sole protagonist, before concluding that his accumulated experience made survival horror gameplay nearly impossible to justify narratively. He's become too competent to be scared. And honestly, that might be the most telling piece of character development in the entire franchise. The series literally cannot make him vulnerable anymore. They built an everyman, then spent 6 games systematically removing every trace of that ordinary person until there was nothing left to threaten. But if Leon's arc is about losing his humanity to competence, the next protagonist's arc is about never losing her humanity at all, no matter what the franchise threw at her. Claire Redfield. Claire Redfield arrived in Raccoon City on September 30th, 1998, the exact same night as Leon Kennedy. But where Leon at least had police academy training and a badge waiting for him, Claire had absolutely nothing. She was 18 or 19 years old, a college student, riding into a zombie-infested city on a motorcycle because her brother Chris hadn't called home in weeks, and she wanted to find him. That's it. That was the plan. Find Chris. Her entire survival toolkit consisted of lockpicking skills, some hand-to-hand combat Chris had casually taught her during family visits, and sheer stubbornness. No government clearance, no institutional backing, no special forces training. Claire Redfield is the franchise's most relatable young protagonist because she survived on pure adaptation. Every weapon she picked up, every puzzle she solved, every monster she outran, she was figuring it out in real time. But here's where her story becomes something more than just survival. When Claire discovers Sherry Birkin, the young daughter of Umbrella scientists William and Annette Birkin, everything changes. Sherry is infected with a G-virus embryo. She's a child, alone, terrified, and dying. And suddenly Claire isn't just trying to escape Raccoon City. She has an actual mission now. She has someone to protect. That emotional shift transforms her entire narrative, and honestly, it's the moment that defines her character for the rest of the franchise. After Raccoon City, Claire didn't slow down. By December 1998, she had infiltrated Umbrella's Paris laboratory looking for Chris. She got captured and transported to Rockford Island, where she met fellow prisoner Steve Burnside. Steve and Claire fought their way through the island together, and it seemed like they might actually make it out. Then Alexia Ashford happened. Steve mutated into a powerful creature under Alexia's control and died in Claire's arms. It hit her hard, really hard. Chris eventually showed up for what might be the worst family reunion in gaming history. The two siblings worked together against Alexia, though Chris handled the final confrontation while Claire escaped on a Harrier jet. And this is a pattern some fans have rightfully pointed out. Claire consistently gets positioned in a supporting role relative to her brother, despite being equally capable and arguably more emotionally compelling. Here's the thing, nobody wants to say out loud, but everybody knows. Claire and Leon debuted in the exact same game on the exact same night. Leon went on to star in Resident Evil 4, one of the greatest games ever made, plus RE6, plus multiple films and side stories. Claire's subsequent appearances were significantly fewer. The franchise never gave her the space her importance deserved, but what Claire did with her screen time matters. By the 2010s, she had joined TerraSave, a human rights organization focused on bioweapon survivors and bioterrorism response. Her work connected her to Leon and eventually to a 2013 US government facility that tried to exploit her expertise. Institutional betrayal, again. It shaped her into someone who navigated official bureaucracy while simultaneously doing underground humanitarian work because she learned the hard way that the system couldn't be trusted. Her consistent pattern tells you everything about who she is. Finding vulnerable people, Sherry Birkin, Natalia Corda, and protecting them while pursuing larger investigations, where Chris compromised his morals and Jill fought to atone for things beyond her control. Claire just kept showing up for people. No agenda, no government handler, just showing up. That's her whole arc, and it deserved more games than it got. But if Claire represents the heart of Resident Evil's protagonist lineup, the next character represents something entirely different. Something you can never fully trust. Ada Wong. Here's something that should bother you more than it does. Ada Wong has never been a primary playable protagonist in a mainline Resident Evil story mode. Not once. And yet she has shaped more critical plot events across more games than several characters who actually hold that title. She's not a side character. She's the invisible hand moving the entire chessboard. Let me explain. Ada was introduced in Resident Evil 2 as a mysterious woman claiming to be searching for her boyfriend in the middle of a zombie apocalypse. That was a lie. Her actual mission was recovering a G-virus sample for an unnamed rival corporation. Her true employer? Never officially confirmed. Her true motives? Entirely her own. From the very first moment she appeared on screen, nothing about Ada Wong was what it seemed. And then there's Leon. The dynamic between these two in Raccoon City is one of the most fascinating relationships in the franchise because it's built on genuine connection and complete manipulation simultaneously. Ada saved Leon's life multiple times during the outbreak. She kept him alive when he had no business surviving, but she also absolutely used him. When the dust settled, Ada didn't stay. She departed Raccoon City with recovered bioweapon materials, extracted via hookshot helicopter arranged by Albert Wesker himself. She helped Leon survive. She also treated him like a useful asset. Both things are true. 6 years later in Spain, Ada resurfaced alongside Leon during the Los Iluminados investigation. This time she was hunting Dr. Luis Serra and Las Plagas samples. Here's where it gets interesting. Wesker directly ordered her to execute Leon. She didn't, but her betrayal went even further than simple disobedience. Ada obtained the dominant species Plaga specimen, the one Wesker actually wanted, and then sent him an inferior sample instead. She ran her own operation inside her official operation. That's not rebellion. That's a masterclass in autonomy. The Separate Ways DLC tracks her parallel objectives during RE4 and confirms something critical about her character. Ada maintained complete moral autonomy while embedded inside Wesker's organization. She chose which orders to follow based on personal principles, not institutional loyalty. Every other protagonist in this franchise is shaped by trauma, duty, or the organization they serve. Ada is shaped by nothing except her own judgment. That's genuinely unusual, and it's what makes her compelling. Now, Resident Evil 6. This is where things get absolutely unhinged. A clone of Ada Wong, created by Derek C. Simmons, was running loose during a global bioterrorism crisis, causing catastrophic damage. Ada spent a significant portion of the game dismantling the operations of her own doppelganger. Let that sink in. Her main antagonist was literally herself. A fake version of her was out there ruining her reputation, and Ada had to clean up the mess while simultaneously pursuing her actual agenda. It's chaos. Beautiful, ridiculous chaos. But here's the thing about Ada's evolution that separates her from everyone else on this list. It's not physical. It's not trauma-driven. It's a gradual clarification of personal ethics. She starts as genuinely opaque. You cannot tell what she believes or what lines she won't cross. By RE6, she's still mysterious, but the principles guiding her decisions have become legible. She will not kill someone she respects for an employer she doesn't trust. She will not hand the most dangerous weapon to the most dangerous man. She will operate in moral gray areas forever, but she will do it on her own terms. Ada Wong is the franchise's living proof that morally gray and principled are not mutually exclusive. And honestly, in a series full of characters defined by what happened to them, there's something refreshing about one defined entirely by what she chose. But if Ada represents the franchise at its most calculated and controlled, the next protagonist is the exact opposite. A guy with zero training, zero intel, and zero idea what he's walking into, i.e. Ethan Winters. Early in Resident Evil 7, Ethan Winters gets his hand cut off, completely severed. And what does he do? He pours some first aid liquid on it, slaps it back on, and keeps moving. Every single player had the same reaction. Okay, that's just video game logic. Whatever. It wasn't video game logic, and the moment you realize that changes everything about this character. Ethan Winters is a systems engineer, not a cop. Not a soldier, not a government agent. He has zero combat training and exactly one reason to be in rural Louisiana. His wife Mia disappeared 3 years ago, and he got a message suggesting she was still alive. That's the entire setup for Resident Evil 7, and it's the most grounded motivation the franchise had ever given a protagonist. The Baker family residence is where the horror lives. Not a corporate laboratory, a house. Jack Baker, Marguerite, their family, all transformed by Eveline, an artificial bioweapon whose mold infection twisted everything it touched. The horror is domestic, family dinner tables, hallways with family photos, and Ethan, this completely ordinary guy, has to survive all of it with whatever he can, scavenge from drawers and shelves. But here's where it gets dark. Throughout the entire game, Ethan takes damage that should kill him, multiple times. He reattaches that severed hand. He survives being impaled, beaten, and brutalized in ways no human body recovers from. The game never explains it. Not until Village. The twist. Ethan was killed by Jack Baker when he first arrived at the property. Before the player ever takes control, Ethan Winters is already dead. The mold had replaced every cell in his body. He wasn't healing. He was demonstrating what happens when the mold has a complete host. The entire game You were playing as something that couldn't die the way a human dies, and neither you nor Ethan knew it. That recontextualizes everything. Resident Evil Village picks up 3 years later. Ethan is living in Eastern Europe with Mia and their daughter Rosemary. Mother Miranda, a shape-shifting superhuman operating for over a century, infiltrates their home and takes Rose. Ethan goes after her, through the village, through 4 lords, each controlling their own territory. Lady Dimitrescu, Donna Beneviento, Salvatore Moreau, and Carl Heisenberg. Every single one standing between Ethan and his daughter, and that's what separates him from every other protagonist in this franchise. Chris fights for duty. Leon fights for his country. Jill fights to stop bioterrorism. Ethan fights for his kid. No mission briefing. No chain of command. Just, I am getting my daughter back. The simplest and most human motivation the series has ever given anyone. He succeeds. He defeats Miranda. But his body, the mold construct that kept him walking across 2 full games, is finally failing. And Ethan makes a choice. He stays behind. He triggers the explosion that destroys the Megamycete, knowing it will kill him. A mold-based being that was functionally immortal chose to die so his wife and daughter could live. That's not video game heroism. That's a father's decision. His consciousness didn't vanish entirely. In the shadows of Rose DLC, fragments of Ethan persisted within the Megamycete's biological archive. He appeared to his daughter one last time, guiding her from inside that network, not as a ghost, as a memory with enough love left to point her in the right direction. His arc is unlike anything Resident Evil had ever attempted. Everyman to posthuman to willing martyr, a guy who went looking for his wife and ended up sacrificing a body that wasn't even really his, anymore for a daughter who might not be entirely human either. Somehow, it's the most emotionally honest story the franchise has ever told. But Ethan's sacrifice didn't just end his story, it started someone else's. Rose Winters. Every protagonist we've covered earned their powers through infection, experimentation, or sheer bad luck. Rose Winters is different. She was born this way. Born August 2nd, 2020, to 2 parents already mutated by mold infection, Rose didn't become a bioweapon subject. She arrived as one. Superhuman cognitive and psychic abilities from birth, mold affinity encoded directly into her DNA. That's unprecedented. Every single protagonist before her had to be changed into something else. Rose just was. Mother Miranda recognized this immediately, targeting Rose as a vessel to resurrect Eva, Miranda's own daughter who had died during the Spanish flu pandemic over a century earlier. Miranda had spent all that time using the Megamycete to search for a suitable host body capable of bringing Eva back. Rose's power wasn't random. It traced through a hereditary network of mold-infected superhumans stretching across generations. But here's where it gets complicated. Having god-tier abilities doesn't mean much when you're a child. Growing up under strict government protective custody, monitored constantly, bullied relentlessly by peers who can tell something is wrong with you. During anxious moments, white substance visibly leaked from Rose's body. Impossible to hide, impossible to explain away. By adolescence, she described herself as hardly even human, the most powerful bioweapon the franchise has ever produced, and she wanted nothing more than to be normal. That desire is what drives the Shadows of Rose DLC, set in 2037, 16 years after her father's death. Rose voluntarily enters the realm of consciousness, the Megamycete's internal mental archive containing centuries of absorbed memories from every consciousness the mold has ever consumed. Her goal is simple: find the purifying crystal, destroy her powers, become a regular person. What she actually finds is a nightmare. Duplicate versions of herself, Eveline's remnant consciousness, the bioweapon from RE7, now existing as a kind of digital ghost haunting the Megamycete's architecture. Physical manifestations of her own trauma and self-loathing given form and teeth. The realm doesn't just challenge Rose physically, it forces her to confront every piece of herself she's been running from. And the purifying crystal she's been chasing? It was never a prize, it was a test. The entire system was evaluating her worthiness from the moment she stepped inside. Everything she endured, every choice she made, was being measured. Rose refuses to surrender her powers. She stops running from what she is and embraces it, uses her mold connection to destroy Miranda's lingering consciousness within the Megamycete. chooses to be powerful on her own terms rather than powerless on someone else's. Analysts suggest she may currently be the most powerful bioweapon in the entire franchise, potentially exceeding both Eveline and Miranda in raw capability. But her journey was never about demonstrating that strength. It was about whether she wanted it at all. But here's the moment that breaks you. The guardian angel guiding Rose through the realm of consciousness, the mysterious presence helping her survive every encounter, protecting her when she couldn't protect herself. It was Ethan, her father, his consciousness preserved inside the Megamycete's biological archive even after his death. The man who sacrificed everything so his daughter could live was still there, in the only form available to him, helping her one last time. He couldn't hold her, couldn't speak to her as himself for most of the journey, but he was there. He was always there. That's the emotional core of everything this franchise has been building toward in its modern era. A father who died for his daughter, reaching across death itself through the very biological network that took his life, just to make sure she'd be okay. Rose ends the DLC by joining Chris Redfield's operation, still under institutional monitoring, but now on her own terms. She's the franchise's newest protagonist archetype, a posthuman who chose her identity rather than having it imposed. She closes the loop on everything Ethan started, but Rose isn't the only character whose identity has been defined by choice rather than circumstance, and nobody in this franchise has made more impossible choices than our next protagonist. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.